Hello, everybody, and welcome again to The Sacred Life. I'm David Baylor, coming to you here with my, I guess he's my brother. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
brother. That's right.
Yeah, okay.
You're correct.
Yeah, John Baylor. John, why don't you tell us what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, in this channel, we look at a lot of different stories. We look at religious icons. A lot of what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at things that speak to the irrational parts of the person or the non-rational parts of a person. And I've kind of for a long time wanted to include some poetry in this. I think poetry has been, like, you could say, stupid and unimportant, irrelevant, culturally irrelevant for a long time. And I suspect that in the near future that will change. I think people are taking an interest in some of the things that we're talking about in icons, in fairy tales and symbolic storytelling. And again, I think poetry is something that speaks to you not just rationally, but speaks to you, you could say, as a whole person, or ideally it does. Like I say, I think poetry has been dumb for a long time. Um, I'm going to look at an Anglo Saxon poem here, and part of the reason that I want to look at this poem is because this is something that you might read in a school. I made my students read it in school. I read this in a classroom in a college class, and it's a very Christian poem. It's a medieval poem, and almost all medieval poems are very Christian. And you can sort of read them and talk about them in school and talk about poetic devices and all that, but you can't actually engage with what the poem is really saying at its core, um, in maybe in any classroom setting, but especially in like a public school or a secular school classroom setting. So I want to take a look at this one, and I just want the chance to be able to talk about this as it was meant to be experienced, rather than as an English teacher would try to teach you to experience it.
Right. So this is more of like a vanity project to scratch your own itches than anything else.
Well, yeah, I mean, in some ways, like I say, I taught this with my students, and I just feel like there are a lot of things that I can't do with it. So yeah, in some ways, it is like there's so much more that I want to do, and I can do it on this channel. But as I said, part of it also is this does fit very much with the goals that we have on this channel. And again, that means engaging in art forms, engaging in symbolic arts, and engaging in those things that treat human beings as if they're more than just um, like rational machines or something.
Yep. Before you get started, we always need to put in our plugs. If you're watching this, haven't subscribed to our channel, definitely would appreciate it if you do that. Like this video, and definitely leave your comments. Interact with us. We really love your comments, even if we don't always get around to responding to them right away. Also, check out the links that will be in the description of this video. John mentioned iconography. I'm actually an Orthodox iconography. These are all my original works behind me.
You
And
are an iconography?
what?
You are an iconography?
I was trying to say iconographer. It might have just come out a little
Okay,
slow, but
gotcha.
yeah. I am an iconography. Well, I am, because the man is the image of God. So I
That
literally
would
am
make
an
you an
iconography.
icon, though, not an iconography.
What?
That would make you an icon, though, not an
I am a
iconography.
work of iconography.
Okay.
Yeah, so you can check that out. That's a great way. That's probably the best way to support us here at The Sacred Life if you're interested in doing that. And we also have a Patreon link. I have an Instagram for my iconography, things like that. You can find that in the description. Yeah, so that's enough for that. I guess we are our own sponsors, so that's the best way you can support us. Just by buying original artwork or prints through the iconography website. So I guess with that, I'll throw it back to you, John, and you can start yapping about your your poetry thing.
Okay. Yeah, sure. This poem I mentioned already, it was medieval. This is going to be an Anglo Saxon poem. And we can't date it really precisely, but maybe you could say sometime around the year 900, probably after the Viking invasions, before this appeared in the Exeter book. But like I said, we can't date really precisely. But for general audiences who aren't real deeply versed in Anglo Saxon history, you could just say it's sometime between the Viking invasions and the Norman conquest. The poem is in some ways reminiscent of the book of Ecclesiastes. The book of Ecclesiastes is going to spend a lot of time saying life is meaningless. Here's all the things that I valued in the past, and it all amounts to nothing in the end. And a lot of it will feel despairing in the ways that Ecclesiastes can feel very despairing. And then it will have an ending on it that that turns to faith. And in the book of Ecclesiastes, it's something like, now that all has been heard, here's the conclusion of the matter. What is it? Fear God and keep his commands, for this is the whole duty of man. And in some ways, it might feel like I don't know if I'm ready to come to that conclusion after all this despair. And yet the book is going to, like the book of Ecclesiastes, I mean, is going to kind of make me think, well, I need to figure out how to move from that despair to what the ending is calling me to. This poem will be kind of the same way. We'll have a very similar kind of despair. And then we'll come to the end and we'll have some statements about like taking comfort and finding stability in faith in God. And if you've like really engaged with what he's saying in the body of the poem, then you might feel like I'm not ready to come to that conclusion yet. But as I said, I think the poem sets you up so that you walk away from it thinking like, okay, I need to figure out how do I move from here to here. And then thematically, this also, the reason I really like the poem is because it does some interesting things with grief. It's going to make some really extreme statements about do not express your grief, and it will kind of give you hints that it's giving you bad advice, as it says that. So like what you're supposed to do with grief can be really complicated, and especially for men, you'll hear very conflicting ideas of like this sort of like pseudo traditional idea, which is not actually that traditional of idea, that men are not supposed to cry or men are not supposed to express negative emotion or whatever. And in contrast to that, you hear this more like 70s pop psychology kind of idea of like, no, men should be expressing their emotions freely. And like crying and being deeply in touch with their emotions. And if you want to know what to do with emotions and how to be in touch with them, then look at women and try to imitate them. And that's the way to really, truly be a man. And both of those messages, they seem like they have some problems, or they seem like living in either way will have consequences for you. And so this poem, I think, is just a really interesting entrant into that discussion, because it will give you the really extreme advice: don't express your grief, and it will also suggest this isn't exactly the way.
Well, that's interesting. Like when we were talking about this, kind of, I don't remember if it was yesterday or the day before. What that way of approaching things reminds me a lot of is really how the Bible does things. The Bible will oftentimes set up two seemingly contradictory ideas in juxtaposition.
Right.
And that's kind of like its way of approaching the higher truth that can't really be directly said.
Yeah, right.
And that's kind of a breakdown between like modern rationalist Christianity, scholastic Christianity that tries to, rationally define everything, and the way Hebrew theology functions. It functioning through this like setting up of illustrations, and then you're trying to look at how the whole story kind of weaves this complete picture and the interplay between these conflicting things, and that's where reality, that's where truth and beauty lies. is in the interplay between like really in the conflict.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
life lies in the conflict, which is unsettling to a modern person to think, but it's
Right.
very much true. And like, ancient Christianity, we very much have this understanding that Christianity is a struggle. It's not it's not like it's not a state that you arrive at through baptism and salvation, but rather it's a life of enduring struggle and asceticism, and that is this constant interplay between these seemingly conflicting ideas. Um,
Yeah.
so
Your
that's
ground rule for logical thinking is the law of non-contradiction.
mhm,
That you can't have a thing that's true and not true at the same time. And yet, if you look at like any kind of ancient tradition that that you could describe as a repository of wisdom, then contradiction and paradox are going to be like the primary tools that you use for coming to truth.
mhm,
We talked about the poem in class a little bit. I know I'm rushing ahead because we haven't even looked at it, but this is one issue that I can talk to the kids about, um, expressing grief and the sort of like two sides of this coin. And I'd hear a lot of this from different people, but one student in particular was talking about a family member that died. And when that happened, he kind of started withdrawing from everybody else and hurting some of his relationships. And he was sort of saying, on the one hand, that this was not expressing my grief was harming me.
mhm,
And in what he was saying, I kind of asked a follow up question, because he was sort of like dropping hints also that that's just what I needed to do. I needed to be alone and withdraw from people. And so I asked, like, it sounds like it also was helping you. I mean, essentially, that's what I asked, you know.
mhm.
And he said, yeah, it was something that I needed. It was helping me and it was harming me at the same time. Not expressing my grief had like both both
Yeah.
of those results.
I really like this idea that the way the ancient Greeks handled grief was to like go play sports,
Yeah,
like have like host these games, and like this is the way in which the men, the games were just for the men. No women were allowed on the site. Um, and then this is their way that they're handling their grief is to like express it physically. And it's like, well, that there really is truth to that. Like that is a major component of how men deal with things. And I think there's a little bit of a parallel to that today, in which the way men will handle grief is like we'll go out and do something.
yeah,
Maybe go to the park and play sports, or maybe we'll go and build something, or go into our garage or into our shop and start making things. Like there's just this physical component for men, especially
yeah.
in how we handle grief. And in contrast to, I guess you would say, the feminine way of handling grief, which is to express it and to mourn over it. I guess what I'm trying to get at is historically we see this pattern that there's a very different way in which men uh, manifest their grief compared to women. That it is like a common criticism of like present day, current year American culture that it's very feminized. And maybe this is an instance of how that is. We're taught like, oh, you need to express your feelings. It's like, yes, you do need to express your feelings, but not in a feminine way.
Yeah, well, I mentioned the idea that men don't express grief, or don't cry or whatever is like
Right.
a sort of like pseudo traditional. Like this isn't actually a traditional belief, but it's like something that if you're only looking at the last 100 or 200 years, then you could say this is traditional.
Yeah.
But C.S. Lewis, I take this from Lewis. He says that an ancient hero and a medieval hero will cry.
Right.
Their friend dies in the middle of the battle next to them. um the body of their friend is disgraced or whatever, like the
Yeah.
hero is going to cry, and there's going to be honor. This isn't like a
Right.
moment weakness or something. This is a moment of like goodness and love and true humanity coming out of this person. So
Right,
that
but
there is a sense in which, like, well, even when you mention like women being the mourners, more associated with mourning and wails of lamentation and all that in traditional society, um, that's not to say that that men don't also do that. And again, that like men don't also cry and let out emotion in that way,
yeah.
because like the difference between men and women is not like a knife is chopped between the two of them and one's on one side and one's on the other. Like anything that's a feminine trait is also present in men.
Yeah, right. But like the distinction there is, the man has his moment of acknowledging and mourning over what happened in the
And then he
battle.
picks up his sword
Yeah,
and
then he picks up his sword and goes. Like I have to think of I won't mention who it is. You obviously know who I'm talking about, but to respect the dignity of the person in question, somebody we know, whose father passed away, and was saying around the time of the funeral, I don't remember if it was to his wife or to his sisters. It's like, you women have it easy because you can just cry.
hmm
And like there's a dignity to that. We might want to criticize that as modern people, but it's like, I'm pretty sure this person cried about his father dying, but in the context of the funeral and being there for his family, he understood, no, I can't do that. Like, I, as the son, need to be the strength that, yeah, I need to be the solid kind of foundation
yeah,
that
well,
my
in
father
that,
was in life for my family at this time.
yeah, that story doesn't come from the funeral. That story comes from sitting in the car in the hospital parking lot. Um,
Yeah.
and so even there's even more of a sense of like he has a duty. I mean, he's going to drive these women home,
Right.
and because he's not crying, he's able to do that for them.
Right. And so this is like his equivalent of, I'm sure he had his moment of grief that was visible to everyone, but then he had to pick up his sword and go to battle in this kind of metaphorical way. Um, is it time to get to the poem, or do we have
Yes,
more?
it is.
All right.
It is. That's plenty of introduction.
All right. So let's. Um,
Okay, this is The Wanderer. Burton Raffles, the translator here, and he's going to be very readable as a translator. He'll capture some of the alliteration from the original, but I don't ever feel like he overworks it. Sometimes you can try too hard to translate the poetic techniques, and you wind up just making like ugly sentences that are hard to follow. And sure, they got all the alliterations in there, but he to me he gives a really nice balance of capturing some of the poetry and also capturing a sense of it. Although when it comes to the very end of the poem, then I've included on this document a couple of other translations of the last stanza, because any other translation I've seen of this captures an idea in the closing that Burton Raffles doesn't get. Okay, I'll dive into this, and I will mention the beginning and the end are going to mention God in a different way than what we'll see once we get out of this first stanza. This lonely traveler longs for grace, for the mercy of God. Grief hangs on his heart and follows the frost-cold foam he cuts in the sea, sailing endlessly, aimlessly in exile. Fate has opened a single port, memory. He sees his kinsmen slaughtered again and cries, I've drunk too many lonely dawns, gray with mourning. Once there were men to whom my heart could hurry, hot with open longing. They're long since dead. My heart has closed on itself, quietly learning that silence is noble, and sorrow nothing that speech can cure. Sadness has never driven sadness off. Fate blows hardest on a bleeding heart. So those who thirst for glory smother secret weakness and longing, neither weep nor sigh, nor listen to the sickness in their souls. So I, lost and homeless, forced to flee the darkness that fell on the earth, and my Lord. I'll pause just a moment here, just make sure we got all the pieces here. First, we're lonely, we're longing for grace, we're longing for the mercy of God. And as I said, we're not going to feel that same sort of, well, maybe we'll feel that kind of longing, but we won't have a positive portrayal of God through the body of this. We won't speak of him very much. It will feel very godless, but when we do speak of him, he's almost like an enemy. Not in this opening, but that's what it will be like. But now we're longing for mercy. And he's in a boat. He's cutting through the frost cold foam. He's in a boat. It's like in the middle of winter. This guy is alone and he's traveling. He doesn't have a home. He's remembering his kinsmen slaughtered again. He's lost the people that he was close to. So that's kind of our situation, our present moment. This is an old warrior. He's lost the people that he loves. He's lost his home and any kind of belonging. And with this, he gives this advice. He says, silence is noble and sorrow, nothing that speech can cure. That means, obviously, if you're sorrowful, don't bother speaking about it. Speaking is not going to heal your sorrow or heal your grief. And there's his kind of extreme advice that he gives. If you're grieving, don't talk about it. Sadness has never driven sadness off. Fate blows hardest on a bleeding heart. If you're talking about it, that's just going to be like that. This talking about the sadness, engaging in the sadness is not going to heal you of it. And it's going to just lead to more troubles. So that's the advice he's giving. But he says this, he introduces it by saying, my heart has closed on itself. And so when he uses language like that, then there's already this sense that he's just about to give you bad advice. Because why would you go to someone who says his heart has closed on itself and ask that person, what am I supposed to do with my grief?
Mm-hmm.
And then those who thirst for glory smother secret weakness. This is another part of his advice. If you want to be great and glorious, smother your weakness and longing. Don't weep, don't sigh, don't listen to the sickness in your soul. And again, this sounds, especially with, we're calling it the sickness in your soul. Don't listen to the sickness in your soul. Again, that sounds like strange advice. That's the advice he's giving, but there's this kind of a hint in there that there's a problem with this. Okay, I'll plan on moving forward. I don't know if you want to interject anything.
I don't have a lot to add for now. I guess I would add a little bit, just thinking about that concept of my heart closing on itself.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of, I don't know, modern bias that we approach to a phrase like that. But thinking like in terms of what's real, sometimes it is like, it is necessary and right and good and the proper thing to do to kind of have this this sort of closing off of parts of yourself to the situation going on. In this,
Right. And what you're saying sounds extreme, but like in all of this, there's two sides to everything he says.
Yeah.
So
Right.
he is giving this as advice.
Yeah.
And even though I'm saying he's hinting that there's a problem with advice, he's still giving this as advice to live by.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So like an extreme example is, what do you do with the question of war and violence as a Christian? And
Mm-hmm.
like the easy answer is, oh, Christians are supposed to turn the other cheek and abhor war and violence, which is true, and that is the highest standard. But let's say your country is being overrun by violent Muslims who want to carry your, because this is a historical reality for a lot of Christians, violent Muslims who want to carry your family off as slaves, and want to take everything from you and impose Islam or impose, a foreign religion on your country. What should your response to that do? And what should it be? And there is like this kind of closing off to a portion of the goodness that has to happen. That's just an extreme example that in extreme circumstances, there's this kind of closing off that has to happen. And I just use that to illustrate, we're usually not in this extreme of a situation, but we are in a situation where if you dwell too much on your grief and you allow your grief to be uh too forward in your heart and too much at the forefront, and like leave your heart open to it always, then it um it takes over and controls you and prevents you from doing what is right. And the reason I used the illustration I did is because just to highlight the fact that it seems wrong to us to say you shouldn't mourn your dead family. You should close yourself off to this sadness and grief. That seems wrong to us, but um, there's always a circumstance in which even a good thing can become a bad thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you could wind up with like a messed up ethic that says if something bad happens to me, then I should just spend the rest of my life feeling sorry for myself and mourning for it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go ahead and roll on if that's okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Leaving everything, weary with winter, I wandered out on the frozen waves, hoping to find a place, a people, a lord to replace my lost ones. No one knew me now. No one offered comfort, allowed me feasting or joy. How cruel a journey I've traveled, sharing my bread with sorrow, alone an exile in every land, could only be told by telling my footsteps. For who can hear friendless and poor, and know what I have known since the long cheerful nights, when young and yearning, with my Lord I yet feasted, most welcome of all. That warmth is dead. Just a real brief interruption just to summarize here. Um, he's lost the people that he used to be close with. He mentions this Lord a couple of times, and his love of this former leader of his is going to come across very strongly in the near future. But he's saying, I've tried to find another home, but nobody can know, nobody can understand. And when they hear that I'm friendless and poor, then nobody wants anything to do with somebody who's friendless and poor. So for someone in my situation, it's impossible to form new friendships. He only knows who needs his Lord as I do, eager or long missing aid. He only knows who never sleeps without the deepest dreams of longing. Sometimes it seems I see my Lord, kiss and embrace him, bend my hands and head to his knee, kneeling as though he still sat enthroned, ruling his thanes. And I open my eyes, embracing the air, and I see the brown sea billows heave, see the seabirds bathe, spreading their white feathered wings, watch the frost and the hail and the snow. And heavy in heart, I long for my Lord, alone and unloved. And again, brief summary. This almost seems like something out of a cartoon, like where the one character's like trying to embrace the other, but it was just their imagination. And it turns out he's embracing the air and seeing the sea billows heave, and his friends weren't there at all. Like I say, it seems like a cartoon. I mean, this is something that you could play for a laugh, but obviously that's not the way it's played here. In his memory, he sees these vivid scenes of the past and the people that he loved and knew. And then he opens up and looks around him, and there's nothing. There's only this wide, empty, cold sea. Sometimes it seems I see my kin and greet them gladly, give them welcome, the best of friends. They fade away, swimming soundlessly out of sight, leaving nothing. How loathsome become the frozen waves to a weary heart. And in this next stanza, I mentioned this feeling like Ecclesiastes. So far, we've seen loss. Things that he used to value are no longer a part of his life. But here we get more of like wise reflections. In this brief world, I cannot wonder that my mind is set on melancholy, because I never forget the fate of men robbed of their riches, suddenly looted by death, the doom of earth, sent to us all by every rising sun. Wisdom is slow and comes but late. He who has it is patient. He cannot be hasty to hate or speak. He must be bold and yet not blind, nor ever too craven, complacent, or covetous, nor ready to gloat before he wins glory. The man's a fool who flings his boast hotly to the heavens, heeding his spleen, and not the better boldness of knowledge. What knowing man knows not the ghostly, waste-like end of worldly wealth? See, already the wreckage is there. The wind-swept walls stand far and wide, the storm-beaten blocks besmeared with frost. The mead halls crumbled, the monarchs thrown down and stripped of their pleasures. The proudest of warriors now lie by the wall, some of them war destroyed, some the monstrous sea-bird bore over the ocean. To some the old wolf dealt out death, and for some dejected followers fashioned an earth cave coffin. Thus the maker of men lays waste this earth, crushing our callow mirth, and the work of old giants stands withered and still. And so again, in there we get reflections on wisdom and what does the wise man look like, and then that sort of transitions right into don't brag. And the reason you shouldn't boast or shouldn't brag is because everything's going to come to an end. And you can see just by looking around you that's what it's like. You can look around and see the waste-like end of worldly wealth. And then he gives these descriptions of old ruins, and probably the work of old giants probably is referring to Roman ruins in Britain, things that were built by this great civilization of times past that we cannot equal today. We've got dead bodies lying by the wall.
Maybe we should talk about the Giants a little bit. I hear people like it when you talk about Giants.
Well, sure. I mean, if you want to, especially if you want to make a connection between that, and like I say, presumably this is speaking about Romans, the things that
Right.
the Romans have built. So I don't know if you had a particular connection about giants you wanted to make with that.
Well, I don't have a whole lot to say. I just do think it's always interesting whenever you see these references pop up. What was about the year again when this was written?
I said probably around 900.
Okay. Yeah. So like this is during a time when that way of thinking is probably still present in the minds of people, depending on where you're at. Especially I would think somebody in Britain, in
Yeah.
contrast to somebody in like Italy, for example.
Right.
But just the idea of thinking of the culture that used to exist as being this culture that is half divine, basically.
Yeah.
Um, but like not like divine, not necessarily meaning good. Divine
Right.
in this pagan sense, where the divinity of the Roman world was definitely, even though it was seen as this great glorious culture, it was also understood like this is a pagan culture.
Right.
And so you're remembering these people as giant in stature, but this is kind of like hinting at there's this kind of unholiness to this Roman world that built all these great things because it was through their open practice of evil that they accomplished what they did.
Right.
And so he's um, connecting that with like this destruction and the maker of men laying waste to that world that once existed.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's been quite some time since these Anglo Saxons would have been pagans themselves. But their pagan tradition would have been similar to the Norse religion. And so you can kind of like have this Norse image of a giant, which is like in some ways older and more essential and even stronger than the gods,
Yeah.
but not good.
Um, well, I mean, I was thinking also especially of Beowulf, the story of Beowulf, which would have been like more or less contemporary, right?
Hmm.
Um, and Beowulf, you have Grendel and the Grendel's race, which are giants
Yeah,
in this same sense. And so there's it's kind of like these are like these primordial beings. In one way, they're like this remnant of the old world that is dead and gone. And that's part of why like Grendel lives like doesn't Grendel live like under a swamp?
yeah. Yeah, it's, I mean, when you read Beowulf, it's actually kind of, it's a little unclear whether, like, Beowulf leaps in the water and he swims downward for hours before
Yeah,
he reaches the home of Grendel's mother, where Grendel is like there, like still like barely alive, but he fights Grendel's mother. But it's
right.
like, is he still underwater when he's fighting her? The text actually is not very clear about that.
Well, yeah, because what's going on is he's going into the realm of the dead.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Um,
that's what that imagery is. He's descending into hell, basically.
right. Yeah.
Like water being, like thinking of like Lethe and Styx in the river and all of that. Like water, also we have that in baptism. Waters, we descend into the waters is us descending into Christ's death.
Yeah. Right.
Um, yeah. So that's what's going
Um,
on.
yeah. And this, I mean,
I mean, it's parallel
again,
to what's going on here in this story too. Is like you're have all this death imagery, and that's where you're talking about. That's where the giants are.
yeah, yeah,
They
and he is out on the water this whole time,
right,
which, I mean, you can say is, if you wouldn't, you wouldn't have to call that the underworld, but you could say this is like total dissolution,
right.
which is what he's experienced in life.
Yeah, it's disorder and um, disunity.
Right,
So it's unlife.
right, yeah. Okay, well, I think I'll roll on down, and I mean, lots of other death talk through that whole section
Yeah,
there as well. And then that has also I said God is like almost described as an enemy when we're in the body of this thing. And this is like, this is the experience of life. This isn't a theological statement when he says, thus the maker of men lays waste this earth, crushing our callow mirth. It's like, this is what life is like to me.
mhm.
And in the intro and in the conclusion, he'll speak about it a little differently, but this is like being very honest to experience here. He who these ruins rightly sees and deeply considers this dark, twisted life, who sagely remembers the endless slaughters of a bloody past, is bound to proclaim, where is the war steed? Where is the warrior? Where is his warlord? Where now the feasting places? Where now the mead hall pleasures? Alas, bright cup! Alas, brave knight! Alas, you glorious princes! All gone, lost in the night as you never had lived. And all that survives you a serpentine wall, wondrously high, worked in strange ways. Mighty spears have slain these men. Greedy weapons have framed their fate. Really lovely passage here with
Mhm.
all this repetition. Um,
I
Tolkien does borrow this.
yeah, I was gonna say I feel like Tolkien stole a lot of the
Yeah, he did. He did. I mean, took it directly from this poem.
right,
It's like a hymn of the Rohirrim or lament,
right. This is like
something like that.
what you see with like Theoden basically saying this same
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Tolkien, of course, was like a world class expert in Anglo Saxon literature.
Right.
I
Yeah, so
mean,
he's not. I mean, we should qualify that he's not stealing and plagiarizing. He is paying homage to this Anglo-Saxon culture that he so deeply loved.
Yeah, right. Yeah, really nice passage, and I mean this people call this the ubi sunt passage as well, which is just be where is or where are.
Yeah.
That's got a name because this is a trope that shows up in a lot of different poems and a lot of different literature.
Yeah.
Where is this? Where is this? Like a way of reflecting on the world that has, well, I'll just say dissolved, just to use the same language that we had before.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting to me is when I'm thinking about this is, thinking of the bloody past that he's talking about. I mean, there's probably some where he's thinking about the constant infighting that's happening between the Anglo-Saxon kings, but then there's also, the fall of the Roman world, which was, we call it the great heathen army invading Roman Britain and just rampaging and destroying.
Hmm.
And so these are the descendants of the great heathen army, but at the same time, their memory of that is like this. Our ancestors were these pagan barbarians who just destroyed everything that was good,
Right.
uh, and created this ruin that we live in today.
Yeah. And of course, they're dealing with a similar threat with the
Yeah,
Vikings, that have started their raiding at this point.
right.
But it's almost like the Vikings and the Anglo Saxons are so much the same. Like when you see these people invading, on the one hand, you can think like what monsters these people are, and then on the other hand, you can think of like, oh yeah, that's what we were like.
Yeah, and still are in a lot of ways.
Yeah, right, right. Okay. All right, I'll just scroll down. I don't think we need to comment too much more, but again, really nice passage there. And just about finished. These are the last two stanzas that you can see on the page here. Although
Mhm.
this doesn't actually even have like clear line breaks in the original. It doesn't have stanza breaks.
Yeah,
Um, but I mean, you can tell it's ordered in a way that we would think about as being line breaks.
right.
Um, it's very structured in that way, but on the page it doesn't look that way. Okay, anyways, I'll read on. These rocky slopes are beaten by storms, this earth pinned down by driving snow, by the horror of winter, smothering warmth in the shadows of night. This is just the cold weather that's smothering the warmth, but we've seen a lot of warmth in the poem when he's remembering the past and these people that he used to love. And so now it's like the present, like the pain of the present is just smothering the warmth that used to exist, the warmth that I carried inside of my own breast, that's being smothered by what I have to live through right now. And the north angrily hurls its hailstorms at our helpless heads. Everything earthly is evilly born, firmly clutched by a fickle fate. Fortune vanishes, friendship vanishes, man is fleeting, woman is fleeting, and all this earth rolls into emptiness. I started off by comparing this poem to Ecclesiastes, and I've mentioned it a couple of times, but this passage through here, and especially that last line, just seems very much to be the same idea. And I don't know if there's influence. There certainly could be. We don't have a very good idea of like if the main body of this poem predates Anglo-Saxon Christianity, although I don't think there's a really strong argument to say that it does. But some people have argued that anyways.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, well, some people just want to say everything good is
well,
not
right,
Christian.
right. Well, they say that because I mean, sort of what I've said is like this whole body of this thing seems so godless and
All
so
right.
despairing, and then you have this description of God that sounds very, very negative, and so some people would say like, oh, then they just tacked a Christian ending onto it, and that's not the interpretation that I'm going with, anyways.
Yeah.
But that's basically the summary of that position. But again, to me, this echoes Ecclesiastes so much. And like I
Yeah.
say, this line, all this earth rolls into emptiness. That's not the way that things are phrased in Ecclesiastes, but like that sentence could be in that book. it would just fit perfectly in the book of Ecclesiastes. It fits better here because you've got this image of the rolling sea all around you, the emptiness that he's surveying in this present moment. But it would still be very much at home in Ecclesiastes, and all this stuff vanishing, and the repetition. This is almost like the repetition of vanity or meaningless or something like that. Just the way the sentences are set up here. So again, a type of reflection that seems, whether it's modeled off of Ecclesiastes or not, it still parallels it. Okay, and then we'll bring it to the end. And then I said I will have a couple of alternate translations of this last one, but I'll go ahead and finish off with Raffles. So says the sage in his heart, sitting alone with his thought. It's good to guard your faith, nor let your grief come forth until it cannot call for help, nor help but heed the path you've placed before it. It's good to find your grace in God, the heavenly rock where rests our every hope. And I'm going to read another before. Maybe I can get those both on the screen. I'll zoom out just a little bit here. Okay, here's a couple other translations of that last stanza as well. And I probably will just read the top one, but you can see the bottom one down there. So spoke the wise man in his mind. He sat apart in secret meditation. It is good for him who retains his faith. Never shall a man express too quickly the grief of his heart, unless beforehand he might know how to bring about the cure, an earl with courage. It will be well for him who seeks mercy, consolation from the Father in heaven, where all our security stands. And what I particularly like about both of these other ones, but these are both going to have this idea that you don't express your grief until you know the cure.
Mm-hmm.
And once you know how to deal with it, once you're working toward a solution, then sure, go ahead and express your grief. When you're working toward a solution, expressing it, that can give you that relief that would have been foolish to seek before, maybe. Other people might be able to come alongside and help you along the way, but other people can't help you along the way unless you already know the cure in some ways. Like a psychiatrist or some kind of counselor or something might say, I can't actually do anything to help you or to save you. I can, like, if you've made the decision to get better, to start changing things in your lives, then I can help you. But I can't help you unless you've already decided that there is a cure, that there is a solution to your problems.
Mm-hmm.
So this is instead of being the psychiatrist or the person on the other end, this is like the person who's going through the difficult thing. That's like, don't talk about it. Don't bother sharing it with somebody else until you know the cure.
Yeah, and it's just like don't let yourself become the slave of your grief. Basically, is
Mm-hmm.
what he's saying is
Right.
be cautious about giving this thing, going back all the way to the beginning, kind of closing your heart off to it until you actually understand what to do with it.
Right.
Because you'll throw yourself into your grief, and then I like it becomes like this thing that dominates and controls you. It becomes this kind of idol in your heart, in a sense.
Yeah. Right.
Where it's like this spirit that you begin, like, in kind of this metaphorical way. It's like this god that you begin offering sacrifices to.
Yeah. I mean, that language also reminds me a lot of C.S. Lewis. He kind of does this in The Great Divorce, but he does it in some nonfiction essay that I can't put my finger on. Well, he probably talks about this in The Four Loves, but I don't think that's what I'm thinking of. But this idea that that you could worship your grief, that it could become an idol. Like I say, that's very present in his writing. And this kind of tempers the slightly more extreme advice that we saw earlier in the poem, which is just like, hey, my heart has closed on itself, just don't talk about your grief. But here there is more of this sense of like, okay, all right, I know before I said don't talk about it, but now I'll let you know there actually is a time when you can talk about it, and that's the time when you know what the cure is going to be. So again, like we're tempering that that advice that was almost strange when we heard it the first time around, and we're tempering it in a way that also suggests there is a cure.
I'm having some problems with my browser here.
Oh,
You can probably see that as I'm trying to fix the layout here.
okay. Well, yeah, I can still comment on that. Again, like when he tempers the advice here, he tempers it in a way that also plants this idea there is a cure, there is a solution to your grief. And if you've been following along with him and like feeling what he's feeling, then you're feeling there is no cure to my grief. You're feeling like, man, I'm so deep and everything. I mean, we're talking about like everybody dying and everything being evil and all this world rolling into emptiness. And then he's going to end with this suggestion that there is a cure. And so now we're wondering like, okay, what is the cure? And it's this, the way this sentence is set up, it says that it suggests the cure is an earl with courage, or the other one says a hero must act with courage. So acting with courage, they, I think the Anglo Saxon is kind of hard to interpret through here.
Is it probably using like, well, I know like in Old Norse you have kinning, and I think you have something similar in Anglo-Saxon poetry where you have like this very like metaphorical kind of language that if you
Maybe, but I
translate it
don't know that that's the situation right here. I think this is more like, and maybe this is a grammar ambiguity or something. But it's like I think this would probably be a little more literal to say, unless he knows how to bring about a cure, an earl with courage, which is
yeah.
like it's just kind of this extra phrase that's thrown in there, and it's a little hard to tell what's going on. I think.
Yes.
I mean, I've seen this in Anglo-Saxon, but I don't. I don't. I'm certainly not any expert in Anglo-Saxon, but I think that's the case. Is like this is grammatically a little bit strange. Okay, but so I mean, maybe courage has something to do with the cure, but then he's going to go on, and you could say like, okay, here's now that we've introduced this idea of, hey, this grief that you're going through that seems unbearable and it seems like there's no solution, there actually is a cure for it. And then he goes on, he says, it will be well for him who seeks mercy, consolation from the Father in heaven, where all our security stands. We saw this like longing for grace in the beginning of it, and it was kind of painful when he mentioned it in the beginning, but then at the end he's like reaffirming like, no, that is the way. Long for grace. As you live your life, long for grace. As you live your life, seek mercy. And then the Father in heaven, here it says this is where all our security stands, and everything else in the poem has like died and fallen apart, passed away from the earth, and we're out on the boat, you know, like no stability, everything is dissolution, but here we have this image of in God our security stands, or this other translation at the bottom says that this is where permanence rests, that things aren't falling apart, things aren't dying and decaying and passing away when they're rooted in God.
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah, I just wanted to check the one up here, the heavenly rock where rests our every hope, which is a little less. Raffle's going to be a little less literal, but again, like that's where we have our security or where we have our permanence. And I mentioned that in a classroom setting, I think almost any classroom, you know, even if it were a Christian classroom, then um, it's sort of difficult to like to hold a poem as being like like actually this is a spiritual meditation. Um, you can look at it and you can say like, well, look, here's where we've got our alliterations in here, and um, here's here's how the work is structured, and here are some of the big themes. But like to really treat the thing as a kind of spiritual meditation um, is just, you can hardly even do it in a classroom. But here we have this sense of like, okay, um, there's grief in life. It's it's hard to deal with. It seems like it's impossible to deal with. It seems like everything is falling apart. Um, but there is one thing. There is one place where things hold together. There's one place where things endure and don't pass away, and that is in the Father in heaven.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mentioned somebody was going to come by my house, and I've got somebody here, so I'll at least need to take a break. But it's also 10:18. I'll need to leave pretty soon, so
Yeah.
hang on for just a second,
All right.
and I'll see. I may have to quit though.
Yeah.
I guess I'll leave this on for right now. I'm just gonna move it to plug it in for a second while they're here.
Okay.
Hey, good. How are you? Good. You coming inside? Yeah.
All right, where's this vent at?
Right on the other side of the wall. Yeah. It'll be in the garage, and we can go out this door now. But it'll be kind of in the way.
Are you back?
I am back.
I should have paused the recording, but I didn't. But that's fine. That's fine.
Oh, that's fine.
I was just checking out the channel analytics, and also had left a left a comment on my post that I put talking about the video that's going live tonight. Basically,
Okay. Well, I don't have a whole lot of time. If you want to chat a little bit, then I can call you and
yeah.
we can talk while I'm driving. But
All right.
anyways, I kind of made my conclusions that I wanted to make.
Right.
So if you've got something else, then you can just jump in with your with your thoughts, and then we'll kind of wrap it up.
Yeah. I'm going to give just a little bit of dead space here. Yeah, I don't know that I have a whole lot more to add other than what I've kind of said throughout. One thing that was kind of coming to my mind during this whole conversation, this whole presentation, was how the Orthodox Church handles death, handles grief, things like that. Like we do have our traditional 40 days of, I guess you could call it 40 days of mourning. And it's like you're praying for the dead for 40 days after the death. And it's like this, there's this 40-day period of, this is traditionally the time in which the soul passes from this this world to God. There's a lot of different things people will say about that, but one idea is like there's this way in which during the 40 days the departed person is still kind of present. Which you can think of that what you will, but one thing it does mean is it's appropriate to have this kind of grief and mourning, because there is this way in which during that time period that person is still kind of with you. And there is like all kinds of psychology that points to kind of the reality of that situation. Is it really is about that time period after somebody dies that the reality of the situation starts to set in for people. So there is this kind of recognition, like it's about 40 days when you start to realize that person is really gone. If that makes sense. And so what I'm bringing out with that is just like there is this there is a proper way to deal with that. And if you're not I don't know, if you're not doing that, if you're not dealing with it properly, then this grief becomes kind of like this demon that imposes itself on you and destroys your life. And that's why the church prays for the dead in the way that it does. That's one of the reasons why is it is what this author of this poem is talking about. It's like, how do we, like, we can't allow this grief into our heart until we know what to do with it. And the church has this way in which it handles that.
Yeah, I think you're only tempting me to talk about other topics that haven't come up yet by that.
Yeah.
So I don't think we'll allow the conclusion to let me go on another tangent with you there.
Yeah, all I really wanted to add with that was just to say this kind of thinking is very much present in the tradition of the church, and the church, is very much aware of the fact that grief is a good thing, but can also be a very bad thing if handled improperly. And there's this this 2,000-year-old, at least, like, it's probably a lot older than that, tradition of what you do about when somebody close to you passes from this life, passes from this world. And it's just, to answer and to deal with all these very questions. I see we're going for a walk now.
Oh, I thought about it. So I got my microphone off because there's some people working in here, but they just stepped out into the garage again.
Yeah.
Some beachies over here,
Uh-oh.
incidentally.
Uh-oh.
Not Aaron, but some of his brothers.
Yeah.
I
I firmly endorse like insults and the like.
Yeah.
That's how we men. That's how we men show our affection.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. So we better wrap this up pretty soon, and I am gonna have to take off before long. But yeah, I mean, just kind of some of what you're touching on there is the poem is dealing with with the reality of grief.
Yeah.
And you know, I stressed that one statement about the maker of men laying waste this earth, crushing our callow mirth. It's
Yeah.
like this is not, I mean, this is not what the author would say as his view of God even, but he would say this is what life feels like in this moment. And I'm not going to lie about it because I'm trying to have good theology. I'm going to tell you what my experience of life is. And again, you say grief being good and grief being painful. I think that's it's a reality that's present in there, but it's also a reality that that there is a cure for it.
Yeah.
There is comfort, for all the pain and all the suffering,
Mhm.
and that comfort comes from that stable rock.
Yeah. I think there's just so much more I'm tempted to say, but I think we need to wrap up. We've had a good had a good talk here. Hopefully we leave some ends open so that people want to leave some comments down in the comment
Yeah, you
section.
can put some comments in there too.
Yeah. I'll think about it at least. I think that's good for now. I guess thanks for joining me virtually. And thanks again to the audience for joining us. I guess that's it. So until next time, as Aaron always says, we wish you peace in Christ.